They said she was too much, too heavy, too loud, too eager with her heart. May Porter never expected love to be easy, but she never imagined it would feel quite so humiliating. The journey west was meant to be a fresh start, a mail-order bride answering a stranger's call for a wife, a home, and maybe a chance. But when she stepped off that train dress, clinging from the heat and hope flickering in her chest, he took one look at her and turned away. "No," he said flatly. "I asked for someone who'd fit on a saddle. That was it. No apology, no grace. Just a train platform, a valise at her feet, and people pretending not to stare." In that moment, May didn't cry. She smiled just enough to keep her dignity and waited until the train hissed away before walking off alone. She'd come all this way. She wasn't going back. But where do you go when nobody's waiting, in a town where every woman was judged by her waistline and her silence? May became a ghost. People talked around her. Some pitied her, others mocked. No one asked if she needed help or if she had anyone left in the world, until he did. A quiet man with shoulders like the trees he chopped for a living, and eyes that didn't linger on her body, but on her bruised spirit. He didn't say much, not at first. Just offered her work help around his homestead if she wasn't too proud. And when she asked, "Why me?" he looked straight at her, dust in his hair and kindness in his voice, and said, "Because you came all this way and you stayed, that tells me everything I need to know." This is a story about second chances, about what it means to be seen not through the lens of shame or size, but for the quiet strength that refuses to quit. It's about a woman told she was too much until the right man showed her she was just enough. And if you've ever felt overlooked, this story might just be for you. In the town of Coal Ridge, Wyoming, where winds scraped the hills like a memory too proud to fade, folks spoke in glances more than words. It was a hard land, and harder still if you didn't quite fit. May Linwood, age 39, arrived with a satchel of hand-sewn linens, a heart full of careful hope, and a letter in her pocket that read, "I seek a woman strong enough to carry a home, tender enough to raise one." She had answered that ad like many other women had, out of desperation, out of escape, out of the longing to matter to someone. But when the train hissed to a stop and she stepped off, her boots hit the dust with the weight of a body too many men had called too much. The man waiting, a merchant named Clive, looked her up and down with eyes sharper than his chin. He glanced at the letter in her hand. "You ain't what I expected," he said. No other words. He turned and left. Just like that. No room at the boarding house, no job, no kin. The town watched her stand there thick and still, like a mountain no one had invited. But May didn't cry. Instead, she touched the hem of her worn blue dress, the one her mother had stitched when May was 16. It didn't fit then. It never would. Still, she kept it as a reminder some things are worth carrying even when they don't fit. She sat on a bench, the letter crumpled in her fist, and whispered to herself, "I may be too much for some, but I won't be nothing to me." That night, a man with ash-gray hair and a limp in his step saw her outside the livery. He didn't speak, just nodded, left a biscuit on the post beside her, and walked away. And for the first time in a long while, someone had offered her something without asking her to be smaller first. The next morning, May awoke stiff and cold on the bench outside the livery stable. But what surprised her wasn't the ache in her back, it was the plate beside her. 2 biscuits this time, and a jar of apple preserves. She blinked against the rising sun and looked around. Coal Ridge had already stirred. Wagons rolled past. Men in dust-streaked hats led mules to water. And there by the corner of the stable stood the same man from last night, leaning on a carved cane hat low over his eyes, not watching her, but not turning away either. May picked up the warm biscuit. It was simple, unsweetened, like something made by hands too old to fuss. She spread the preserves with her finger and took a small bite. And as she ate, she noticed something strange inside herself. She wasn't ashamed. His name was Caleb Danner, a widower in his early 50s with a beard full of ash and hands that had seen war and weather. Folks called him Mule Caleb since he owned the last remaining mule team in town. He didn't talk much. He just showed up. That evening, May heard footsteps again and turned. "I've got work if you're looking," Caleb said, his voice slow and gentle like molasses on a cold spoon. "What kind?" she asked. "Sorting beans." "In the barn." My eyes ain't what they used to be. Yours seems steady. She almost declined. She'd been taught not to impose, not to take up space, not to say yes too fast. But she looked at him, at the way his right shoulder dipped a little when he stood. Something told her he wasn't offering pity. All right, she said. I'll sort your beans. I'll... Inside his barn, the air smelled of hay rust and old tobacco. There was no small talk, no questions about where she came from or who had rejected her. Just a wooden crate, a lantern, and 2 tin cups filled with weak coffee. Caleb sat beside her on an overturned bucket. He didn't say much, but when he handed her the next scoop of beans, their fingers touched. May almost flinched, but he didn't move away. Just let the moment settle like dust in a quiet room. You married, she asked, finally not quite looking at him. Was. She passed 3 winters ago. I'm sorry, he nodded. You don't need to be. And then quietly, almost like a question. You came for someone else, didn't you? May swallowed. He said I was too big to keep house properly. Said he needed someone neater. Caleb looked down at her hands, calloused, sure and steady. I reckon neat don't warm a home, he said, or mend a mule's harness. May didn't know how to answer that, but her eyes stung. Not from shame this time, from being seen. That night when May left his barn, there was a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the jar of preserves. Just 5 words in his rough handwriting. You're welcome back tomorrow, May. Next morning, May brushed the dust off her skirt, braided her hair, and walked to Caleb Danner's barn with the slow certainty of someone trying not to hope too much. She'd folded his note in half and tucked it inside her boot. Just touching it made her feel steadier. He was already there, seated on his usual bucket lantern, lit though the sun was rising. A second bucket had been placed beside him. She didn't ask who it was for. She sat. For days this rhythm continued. May sorted beans, stacked grain sacks, even helped patch the chicken coop after a windstorm cracked the frame. She didn't ask questions, and neither did Caleb. But in the spaces between work, she began to notice the quiet things. He brewed coffee exactly how she liked it, more water than grounds. He whittled a small spoon handle, shaped like a swan's neck, and left it where she'd find it. He cleared a place for her coat on the wall, without ever saying it was hers. No one in town really asked about her anymore. The girls who'd once pointed and whispered no longer looked her way. But May didn't mind. Her world had grown smaller, steadier, more real. One evening after supper, biscuits and stewed beans, which they shared on the back porch, Caleb surprised her. Do you miss anyone, he asked. May stared out over the yard. The moon was rising above the tree line. I miss someone I never got to be, she said quietly. I spent years trying to be less. Less loud, less hungry, less visible. I thought if I shrank myself enough, someone would finally say, she'll do. Caleb didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, funny thing is, I kept hoping I'd meet someone who took up space. The next Sunday, Caleb invited May to supper, not just the 2 of them, but with his neighbors, the Grangers, who lived a half-mile down the hill. May hesitated. It's just supper, he said. But for May, it wasn't. It had been years since she sat at a stranger's table, felt the sharp eyes scanning her plate, her waist, her silence. Still she went. Mrs. Granger was a tall, opinionated woman who served roast beef and blackberry cobbler. She looked May up and down but said nothing cruel. Mr. Granger talked mostly about cattle feed and rattlesnakes. And when May reached for a second helping of cobbler, Caleb casually slid the bowl closer. Not a single soul blinked. That night back at the cabin, May felt something she hadn't in a long time, not just comfort. She felt welcome. She turned to Caleb as he stoked the fire. You didn't have to invite me. I didn't want to go alone, he replied. May smiled. Next time I'll bring cornbread. Caleb gave a slow nod. That'd be real fine. But the next morning when May arrived at the barn, Caleb wasn't there. His mule stood restless in the stall, and a muddy boot print led toward the trail and out of town. May stood still, eyes fixed on the single boot print. The barn was quiet save for the restless shift of Caleb's mule and the soft creak of ropes in the rafters. He was gone. She checked the feed room. The smokehouse even circled the edge of the woods. Nothing. The second morning passed and still no sign. Caleb Danner had vanished the same way he'd first appeared in her life, quietly without warning. For the first time since arriving in that dusty town, May felt a different kind of ache. It wasn't the shame she carried in her body or the hollow left by years of rejection. It was worry. She didn't know she'd cared so much until the emptiness of the barn proved it. By the third morning, she was on a wagon headed toward the canyon trail, carrying nothing but a water flask and a saddlebag of cornbread dried apples, and Caleb's note, the one she'd once tucked in her boot. She showed the shopkeep in the next town Caleb's name. He nodded toward the old trail leading to Blue Hollow Ridge, said he had family buried there. But folks don't go that way much. Storm ruined half the pass. May thanked him heart-thudding. What kind of man disappears without a word, and what did it say about her that she wanted to follow? The trail was rough. Her skirt caught thorns, her boots filled with dust. But with every step she repeated a small prayer, not to heaven, but to herself, don't turn back. By sunset, she found him barely. Caleb was on the edge of the ridge, sitting beside a small wooden marker, overgrown with brush. His left hand rested on his knee. His right sleeve was rolled back, revealing the faded, twisted scar where his arm ended just below the elbow. May hadn't noticed before, or maybe she had, and it hadn't mattered. He looked up when he heard her boots. "You followed me," he said quietly. "I brought cornbread," she replied, just as soft. They sat in silence a long while. Finally, Caleb nodded toward the grave. "My wife. Passed 3 winters ago. This trail's where I buried what I thought was the rest of me, too." May didn't press. He spoke again, voice tight. "She was kind, but I never made her laugh. I think I was always trying too hard to deserve her." May stared at the marker, then at Caleb. "And me?" she asked. "Are you trying hard to deserve me, too?" "No," he said, eyes meeting hers. "You just fit." For May, the word hit deeper than any compliment ever had. Not beautiful, not thin, not even sweet. Just fit. Like she had a place she hadn't needed to shrink to fit into. Back in town, the rumors began about the widow who disappeared with Caleb Danner, the scarred rancher who hadn't looked at a woman in 3 years. And not everyone was happy she'd come back. The town of Dry Creek was the kind of place where silence had its own voice. You could feel it watching you through cracked windows, behind swinging saloon doors, in the hush that followed every clink of your boots on the boardwalk. When May returned with Caleb, seated beside him on the wagon bench, the town didn't erupt in gossip. It simmered. Old Miss Thatch from the post office whispered to her sister on the porch. Mr. Lambert muttered something to the barber and shook his head. Even the school teacher, normally kind, offered May only a thin smile as she passed. It wasn't what they said aloud. It was what they didn't. And that silence, that same heavy hush May had carried with her for years, wrapped itself around her again. Not because she was different, but because she dared to stay. "Are you sure you want to come into town with me?" Caleb asked, noticing her shoulders tense. May glanced down at her hands, round, strong, capable. Not delicate like the mail order ads promised. Not slim and graceful like the women in town, but real. "I'm tired of being somewhere only halfway," she said. "If I'm here, I'm here." So she walked beside him, to the feed store, the post, even the Sunday service. And every time she stood tall, or at least tall enough. But it wasn't just the townsfolk watching. It was Caleb's past, too. One afternoon, she found a faded photo in his drawer, a woman with soft hair, eyes a little like May's, but thinner, neater, buttoned up like a preacher's wife. On the back, a name, Rachel, his wife. May tucked the photo back without a word. But that night when she set down supper, her voice cracked just slightly. "Did she look like me?" Caleb didn't glance up from his plate. "No." May nodded. She didn't need to ask more. But he set down his fork gently. "Rachel was sweet," he said, "but always afraid of saying the wrong thing. You speak your mind. You feed the animals before yourself. You hum while you work. Rachel never did that." May looked at him. He added quietly, "And when I wake up beside you, May, I don't feel like I'm betraying her. I feel like I'm still alive. But living meant facing storms, and not just the kind that rattled shutters." When Caleb's brother showed up unannounced and grim-faced, the truth about May's past was about to be dragged into the open. The morning Caleb's brother arrived, the wind changed. May had been kneading dough by the window when she spotted the rider cresting the hill. His figure was broad, upright, and unfamiliar, but the way Caleb's shoulders stiffened beside her said everything. "That's Owen," Caleb murmured. My younger brother. Haven't seen him since the funeral. May wiped her hands on her apron and nodded. He doesn't know about me. No, Caleb said. But he will soon. Owen dismounted with the confidence of a man who still thought the world should shape itself around his expectations. His eyes flicked to May, pausing, calculating then, back to Caleb. You're remarried, he said flatly. No papers, Caleb replied. But yes, May offered a hand. May Porter. Owen took it, his grip firm, his eyes sharper. You were advertised. The words stung, but May had long grown used to words that didn't fit. I was invited, she said calmly, and I stayed. Dinner was quiet. Owen ate like a man expecting proof, like every bite was testing her worth. She cooks well, he told Caleb later by the porch. She's not here to feed you, Caleb said, voice cool. She's not Rachel. No, Caleb agreed. She's May. The next morning, May found Owen outside watching the barn. She's gone, he said, not turning to look at her. I know. You think Caleb really needs someone like you? May didn't flinch. No, I think he wants someone like me. That matters more. Owen tilted his head. Folks in town talk. They always do. He studied her for a moment longer, then gave a slow nod. You've got grit, he said. Rachel never liked the dust. May almost smiled. Almost. But it wasn't Owen who unsettled her the most. It was herself. Because for the first time, she didn't feel like she was clinging to someone's scraps. She felt like she was part of something real, and that terrified her more than all the rejections that had come before. Could love truly grow in a place where it was never expected to bloom? When a telegram arrives bearing Caleb's name, and a legal demand May never expected, she must choose, defend the life she's building, or run before it's taken from her again. May stood with trembling hands, the telegram crumpled in her palm. It had arrived on horseback from town, a folded threat tucked inside a Western Union envelope. Caleb read it once, then, again slower the second time, as if the words might change. Rachel's father had filed for custody of Anna. It's a long shot, Caleb said, but he's arguing blood rights. Claims you're not fit to raise her. May's voice barely rose above a whisper. Because I'm not her mother, Caleb touched her arm gently. Because you're not his version of a mother. The next few days were a blur of worry and half-slept nights. May found herself watching Anna more closely, the way her tiny hand curled around May's thumb, the way she leaned in when frightened by thunder. She'd become more than just a part of the household. She was hers. They rode into town together for the hearing. Caleb wore his only pressed coat. May wore her resolve. The judge peered over rimmed spectacles. You're not legally wed, he noted, and the child isn't yours by blood. No, sir, May said calmly, but I'm the one who stayed when her birth mother left. I'm the one who got up for every fever read to her through winter nights and sat through every silence she didn't have words for. Tell me what makes a mother, and I'll tell you what I've lived. A hush fell over the room. Even the judge looked away for a moment, perhaps gathering himself. That night, back at the homestead, they waited under the stars. Anna nestled between them, asleep beneath a patchwork quilt May had sewn from scraps no one else wanted. Caleb leaned in. They said yes. May closed her eyes, not to block out the joy, but to let it settle deep like rain into thirsty ground. She had arrived thinking she would always be someone's second choice. Now she was a mother, a partner, a woman chosen freely, not for her appearance, nor out of pity, but for the strength she carried quietly in her bones. And she was staying. Sometimes love doesn't arrive in grand gestures or perfect packages. Sometimes it comes quietly through shared meals, through mended fences, through the kind of presence that doesn't flinch when the world has turned its back on you. May Porter was once rejected for the space she took up, for the way her dress hugged her belly, for the laugh that was too loud for daring to hope. But in the quiet of that little homestead, with a man who had lost as much as she had, she found something far deeper than romance. She found a place where she didn't have to shrink, a place where her worth wasn't measured by her size but by her kindness, her courage, her faithfulness. And in the stillness of a Wyoming sunset, rocking gently on a creaky porch, with his arm draped over hers, not out of pity but out of pride, May realized this wasn't a story of what she lacked. It was a story of everything she carried. If you've ever felt unseen or unchosen, I hope this story reminds you that love has a way of finding those who keep walking even with broken hearts. Thank you for spending time with us here on Nun, Wild West Saga. If this story touched you, please consider subscribing, sharing, or leaving a comment below. Would you like to see more stories like May's? Or perhaps her next chapter? Let us know. We're here and we're listening.